Chapter 26. The next morning on our way to the gym, something occurred to me. "Where are Troy and West?" I asked Gavin. Well, He pinched the bridge of his nose with one hand and looked out the window. It was clear he didn't want to tell me. I turned and looked at Raphael sitting on my other side. "Can you tell me?" He met my gaze for several seconds. We interrogated them several times, keeping them in the same storeroom they kept you in. Once we'd gotten everything from them we could, they ceased to be a problem anymore. Ceased to be a problem? I bit my upper lip, as in ceased to exist. That's the general idea, Raphael said. When? He shrugged. Before the party. I closed my eyes and took several deep breaths. Jessup's body wasn't the only one in that fire, was it? Why waste a good disposal fire? He looked at me a moment, gauging my reaction. No reason it wouldn't work as well for 3 as it would for 1. I was quiet the rest of the trip. It wasn't that I had a problem with killing the men, that had needed to be done, but why hadn't Devin told me? Later, around 10 a.m., I was in my office going over listings when my PCD rang. It was Devin's ringtone. "Hey baby, where are you?" "At work, why?" "Because I need to send over a replacement guard for you. I've got something else I need Nickie to do." "Can I ask what?" I checked the connection in the back of my mind, but got no sense of trouble. "I'd prefer not to talk about it over the phone. How about we meet at the house for lunch and we can talk then?" "All right, when?" "About 12:30. I'd have a chance to ask him why he hadn't told me about West and Troy, as well as find out whatever was going on now." "Sounds great. I'll see you then." I hung up and set the device on the desk, staring at it for a moment as I wondered what was going on. Taking a deep breath, I let it out slowly and went back to work. A little after noon, my guards and I left the shop. Nickie had come to the office to let me know his replacement had arrived and that he was going. I was a little surprised to see who had taken his place. Gabriel was usually assigned to the Aniquitos. He spent most mornings with him. Now I was really curious what was going on, but I wanted to give Devin the chance to tell me first. Devin was waiting when we got home. He'd already pulled leftovers from the fridge and started heating them. I sat at the table and watched him move around the kitchen, Gavin helping where he could while Gabriel sat across from me. Devin waited until we were all seated to explain. "I got a call from Andre Echelon this morning. Do you remember him?" I frowned. "Yeah. He's the Aniquitos in Yuma. It had been on the way back from Yuma that I'd gotten food poisoning and lost the baby. Memories of that trip weren't my favorites." "What did he want?" He looked down at his plate, then back up at me. "They've spotted one of our killers over there." "Which one?" Gabriel asked. "Anderson." "Any sign Garza's with him?" Gabriel asked. "No sign of Garza." Devin shook his head. "What now?" I wanted to know. "I sent Nickie and Raphael to see if they can find him and bring him back." "Was Echelon okay with that?" I asked, watching him. "Yeah," he said. "He said he'd rather we come get him than have his pack get involved." I shrugged. "Okay, now what?" I took a bite of the enchiladas on my plate. "Now we wait. See if they can find him." Devin looked around the table. "In the meantime, you'll have a couple new guards. I know you prefer people you know, but Nickie and Raphael are our best trackers. I needed them in Yuma." I understand. I really did. I could live with someone I didn't know. Hell, Gavin and Nickie both had started out as people I didn't know well. I'd also prefer if you'd work from home as much as you can. He held up one hand, stopping me from protesting. I understand you've got to spend a certain amount of time in the office and that you need to be there for deliveries, but I'd feel better if you were at home when you can be. I leaned back in my chair. What could I really say to that without sounding like a selfish brat? I'll see what I can do. It wasn't a promise to stay home, but it wasn't refusing either. He gave me a discontented look. Anyway, once they return with or without Anderson, we'll decide where to go from there. What do you need from me? Gavin asked. Devin turned to look at him. Just keep Nickie safe. Knowing she's protected will let me worry about what I've got to do. Gavin nodded. I can do that. He turned to Gabriel. You're with her today. I'm not sure what I'll do tomorrow, though. I'll look at who I can shuffle around and what needs to be taken care of. Gabriel nodded once, maintaining eye contact. I leaned forward and leaned against the table. On a slightly different topic, I felt his eyes turn to me. Why didn't you tell me that Troy and West were no longer a problem? I moved the food around my plate. He took a deep breath and let it out in a rush, then scrubbed one hand over his eyes. I wasn't hiding it from you. I just didn't want you worrying about it. What did you learn from them before they were killed? Nothing we didn't already know. There were a few details like where they'd been for the last couple of months, but nothing helpful. Why'd they kidnap us? They wanted to get to Brandon, to free him. And what did they do to me? How did they mess with our connection? He shook his head and let his arm drop flat on the table. It landed with a slap. We couldn't get anything out of them about that. They said they'd used a drug cocktail, narcotics and animal tranquilizers, but as far as we know, none of the drugs they used have that kind of effect on us. Leaning back in my chair, I folded my arms against my chest and scowled. I'd hoped we'd at least be able to find out what they'd done, possibly how to counteract it. I guess that was a lost cause. So Garza's not in Yuma. Not as far as we know. And there's no word of him anywhere else? Nothing so far. I covered my face, then pressed my fingers against my temples. This seemed to never end. I kept hoping this would end soon, but it wasn't looking good. I'll call Bill and let him know I'll be working from here most of the week, then call Kathy and see if she can schedule appointments for anyone who needs to see me. Devin laid one hand on my thigh and squeezed. Thank you. I'm just ready for this to be over. I want some semblance of my life back. I know, baby. I know, and I'm trying. I'm not blaming you, I'm just frustrated. No one can blame you, Nickie. Gabriel looked at me. You've been through a lot recently, you've handled it remarkably well. Well, most of it, at least. I couldn't help saying. Like I was saying, you've handled everything that's been thrown at you remarkably well. No one blames you for wanting things to settle down, or wanting a normal life. I gave him a smile. I hadn't known him all that long, only for the 8 months since I'd first shifted and learned about the Kitsune. But he'd been a good friend to me in that time. Thank you. You go ahead and talk to Kathy. Devin took my hand and wove his fingers among mine. I'll take care of the Aniquitos. I've got to talk to him anyway. I squeezed his hand. I will. What are your plans for the rest of the day? I thought we'd go back to the shop. I can pick up some things and talk to Kathy in person, then we can come back and I'll do what I can from here. He nodded, distracted. That sounds great. I'm not sure what time I'll be home tonight. I've got several things to take care of and I don't know how long they'll take. We'll stay with her until either you get home or our relief shows up, but only if it's someone either you or the Aniquitos has called and told us is coming. Gabriel said. Thanks. Devin. I frowned. Prior approval of relief was new. Is there some reason to increase security? It seems a bit excessive. Only that Anderson's been spotted. And only a few hours from here. But he is hours from here. He was, but he could already be gone. He could be headed here for all we know. If he is, he could be here before our men get there to look for him. I'd prefer to make sure you're safe rather than be sorry later. I watched him a second longer, then looked away. Okay. I guess I could understand that. It wouldn't have occurred to me that he might be a threat that far away. Gavin stood, pushing his chair away from the table and carried his plate to the sink. He turned and leaned back against the counter, resting his hands on the bar on either side of his hips, one ankle crossed in front of the other. He watched us with curious eyes. If there's nothing else, I've got things I've got to get done. Devin leaned over and kissed my cheek before standing and taking his plate to the sink. I can't think of anything. I guess we should head back too. The sooner we get there, the sooner we can get back. Devin left and I excused myself for a few minutes. I went in the bathroom attached to my bedroom after Gabriel checked the room to make sure there was no one there, and washed my face. My makeup had to be redone, but the process helped me relax some. This whole situation had me tense and on edge. I didn't like it. Instead of heading into my office as soon as we got back to the shop, I made a detour and knocked on the door to Kathy's office. I waited several seconds, but there was no answer. She must be in the shop, I muttered to myself, and headed to the public area of the store. Reaching the front room, I found Rissa standing near the register, dusting some of the small items on the shelf behind the counter, while Kathy spoke with a couple of patrons. I looked around, then went to Rissa at the counter to wait for Kathy to be free. Well, did we scare you off last night? I asked as I got close enough. She gave me a confused frown. What are you talking about? The horde that is my family. Did we scare you off? She laughed. No, you didn't scare me off. Why would you? Well, there are a lot of us. More that weren't there last night. I shot her a sympathetic smile. We can be loud, nosy, and a lot to contend with. She shook her head, still laughing. You're funny. Your family was nothing but welcoming. I fought to keep a straight face. That's because they were going easy on you. They didn't want to scare you off too fast. Who knows how long it might take Rain to bring another girl home. Oh, she looked at me out of the corner of her eye. How long has it been? Well, aside from when we were teenagers and our folks wanted to meet our dates, the last time he brought a girl to Sunday dinner was, I paused for dramatic effect, never. She froze, slowly turning to look at me, her eyes wide. Never? Never. I couldn't help but grin. She recovered quickly and turned back to what she was doing. Well, if I get my way, he'll never bring anyone else. I like that idea. I looked over at Kathy and found she'd finished with the people shopping and headed back to the rear of the store. I've got to go. Why don't you come by the house sometime? We can visit more. All right. Following Kathy, I caught her before she disappeared behind her office door. I need to talk to you for a minute, if you don't mind. Sure, she said, turning to face me. What's up? Can we sit down a moment? I motioned to the chairs waiting inside the room. Sure, come on in. She moved around to the other side of her desk, and I pushed the door almost closed. Not that what I needed to tell her was private, but I didn't want our voices to carry, and anyone who wasn't Kitsune to overhear us. I don't know how much you're aware of, but we've had a few, I paused looking for the best way to put it, security problems recently. She nodded, waiting for me to continue. Another one popped up this morning, and Devin has asked me to work from home as much as possible. Okay, she seemed to be waiting for me to finish. I'll still come in for deliveries and appointments, and I'd appreciate it if, for a few days at least, we can set up appointments for anyone wanting to see me. I don't see any problems with that. She looked down at the desk for a second, then back at me. You've always done a good job for us, whether you're working in the office or from home. Thank you. I folded my hands together in my lap. Take the time you need. We'll work around what you need. Thanks so much. I stood. I'm going to go gather what I'll need for the next few days. I'll be in touch to keep you informed of the delivery schedule, as well as finding out about any meetings that get scheduled for me. That'll be fine. She smiled and nodded goodbye as I left. How did that go? Gavin asked as soon as the door clicked shut. I shrugged. Fine. She didn't give you any trouble? No, why should she? I stepped past him to the door to my own office. Besides, it's not like she actually hired me, Bill did. I'm doing the job, so she really has no complaints. He followed me inside. Having a reason rarely stops people from complaining. True, but I somehow think she's quite aware that I outrank her. In the pack? He tilted his head to one side. You really think that she isn't saying anything because you outrank her? I shrugged. I don't know. It just strikes me as odd that she never has any objections. Whatever I do is fine. Maybe she's just that easygoing? Picking up a folder, I stacked all my paperwork inside, then looked around the room. I felt like I was forgetting something. Wondering if it would help, I sat down and looked at the desk again. Nothing. Opening each of the drawers one at a time, I found what it was. My list of clients and what they were looking for. Adding it to my folder, I stood. You ready? Gavin asked. Yep. We headed out, Gabriel joining us on our way out. Back at the house, I settled into the living room, spreading my paperwork out on the coffee table while I used the web on the screen mounted on the wall to search listings. I don't know how long I'd been working when the sound of Devin's truck pulling into the yard caught my attention. I glanced at the clock. Crap, it was almost 6. I hadn't even thought about dinner, much less started anything. The back door opened, and a cold gust of wind moved through the house. I shivered as I gathered up my papers and put them back in their folder, leaving it on the coffee table for tomorrow. Deciding I might as well face the problem head-on, I pushed myself up off the floor and padded into the kitchen in my stocking feet. Twisting from side to side, I stretched the stiffness from my muscles. I must have been sitting on the floor longer than I realized. They haven't found him yet, but Mouse says he thinks he's got his scent and hopes they'll be able to pick him up soon. Devin was saying. He was filling the guys in. Orders for tomorrow? Gabriel asked. I stepped into the room and found them all standing near the center of the room. It wasn't just the 2 men who'd been with me all day and my husband, but Mike as well. He was probably who would be staying with us tonight. It kind of surprised me. I liked Mike well enough, but I hadn't known that Devin trusted him that much. I leaned against the doorway and listened in. You're on Bill tomorrow, as usual. Devin turned to look at Gavin. Same as usual for you, but no trip to the gym, not till the other guys get back. Gavin nodded. All right. Ethan will be here in the morning. He's gonna be here with you tomorrow. So, we're good to go? Gabriel asked. Sure are. If you hear anything more on either Anderson or Garza, be sure to let me know. Will do. Gabriel started gathering his things. Gavin turned away but didn't go to leave. Instead, he went to the stove. He stirred something on the stove, then took a pan out of the oven. I had been so into what I was doing that I hadn't even noticed the smell of dinner cooking. I rubbed my hands over my face, not sure what was wrong with me. Devin's eyes turned to me and smiled. A wave of caring and comfort came through our connection. How'd it go with Kathy? Fine. I stayed where I was. He turned to Mike. Make yourself at home. It looks like Gavin's made dinner. You know where everything is right? You've been here for team meetings? I'm good, Mike said. Go about your evening, I'll be fine. Devin turned and grinned at Mike, then took the 3 steps to pull me into his arms. Hey baby, he lowered his mouth against mine. Get a room you two, Gavin said, nudging Devin in the side playfully. Hey. Devin grinned. This is my house, I can kiss my mate if I want to. Mike chuckled. I smiled at Devin. Yeah, well, a kiss is one thing, sucking tonsils while I've got dinner waiting is another. Gavin gave him a look from the corner of his eye. I could see he was teasing Devin, and I tried to keep a straight face. Devin stood staring at Gavin, mouth hanging open and eyes wide. Gavin only grinned. Come on. I nudged Devin. He's cooked, the least we can do is eat before it gets cold. Devin looked at me, then back at Gavin. All right. He turned me toward the table and pulled out my chair. The next afternoon when Devin came home, the men gathered in the kitchen again, and I went to listen in. I leaned against the doorway like I'd done the day before. Nickie and Raphael are on their way back, with Anderson in custody, Devin said, glancing at me before looking back to the men in front of him. Where'd they find him? Ethan asked. Small town this side of Yuma, I'm not sure of the name, Devin said. What's the plan once they get back? Gavin wanted to know. He'd been quiet and reserved all day. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I got the feeling that he and Ethan didn't get along. Once they get back, we'll question Anderson, see what we can get out of him. I'm hoping he knows where Garza is, but I'm not holding my breath. Then? I asked. You know he's gotta die, don't you, baby? Devin looked at me, his eyes soft. Yeah, that's not what I'm asking. What is it then? I want him to suffer some first. Like? They beat her to death. I want him to be beaten a couple times before he's killed. Simply killing him is letting him off too easy. I want him to be sorry for what he did to her before he dies. Ethan looked at me, eyes wide, then turned back to Devin. You got a bloodthirsty one, didn't you? Devin smiled at his predecessor. And I wouldn't have her any other way. He turned back to me. What do you think I meant by we'll question him? Ask him questions. I frowned. The phrase itself was pretty self-explanatory. He's not going to just tell us what we want to know. We're going to have to persuade him. I was quiet a second, thinking. Okay, I can deal with that. Do you want to see him? Gavin asked. Devin scowled at him. I don't know. Right now, no. But I might change my mind. I tilted my head till it rested against the doorframe too. My mate turned his unhappy look on me. Apparently, he didn't like the idea of me confronting Anderson. At the moment, it didn't do things for me either. He turned back to the men. Anyway, tonight same as last night. Mike will stay here. Tomorrow the two of you will relieve him. Any questions? Nope, Ethan said. No, sir, Gavin put in. Then you're free to go. Have a good night. I watched Gavin and Ethan gather their things and leave. My husband looked at Mike. You know the drill, make yourself at home. He turned to me. Any plans yet for dinner? I rubbed one hand over my face. I was thinking steak fingers and zucchini, maybe some potatoes. Sounds good to me, what can I do to help? I pushed away from the wall and moved to the fridge, pulling things out for dinner. Start washing and cutting the potatoes, I'll take care of the rest. All right. Mike sat at the table so he'd be out of the way while we worked. I got the zucchini washed, cut, and started, then looked at Devin. Have you had Bo try to find Garza yet? He shook his head. We're having trouble locating something of his for Guidry to use as a focus. He diced the potatoes with a practiced ease, using the sharp blade like it was an extension of his hand. You can't find anything? Nothing suitable. We know where a couple things are, but we can't get our hands on them. Where? STPD evidence locker. Remember, they're investigating his disappearance, along with Anderson and Jessup. I took a deep breath. Should we ask Rain if he can help us out? Not give it to us, but let us have access. I assume Bo could do his thing with Rain there, so there would be no chain of custody issues? I mean, not that they'll ever find him, but still. It's something to think about, but let's hold off until after we've dealt with Anderson. Then we can focus all our resources on Garza.